Face to Face with Netaji. From An Indian Pilgrim, an unfinished autobiography by Subhas Chandra Bose. In spite of all the respect I cherished for my parents since my early years, I did yearn for a more intimate contact with them and could not help envying those children who were lucky to be on friendly terms with their parents. This desire presumably arose out of a sensitive and emotional temperament. The presence of so many elder brothers and sisters seemed to relegate me into utter insignificance. That was perhaps all to the good. I started life with a sense of diffidence, with a feeling that I should live up to the level already attained by those who had preceded me. For good or for ill, I was free from overconfidence. I lacked innate genius but had no tendency to shirk hard work. In January 1909, when I joined Ravenshaw Collegiate School, Cuttack, the 4th class, I had read hardly a word of Bengali, my mother tongue, while the other boys had already reached a high standard. I remember that the first day I had to write an essay on cow. I was made the laughing stock of all my classmates. I knew nothing of grammar and precious little of spelling. And when the teacher read out my composition to the whole class, with running comments punctuated with laughter flowing in from all sides, I felt humbled to the dust. However acute the mental torture, there was nothing I could do but put up with the humiliation and secretly resolve to make good. Slowly and steadily, I began to gain ground, and at the annual examination, I had the satisfaction of getting the highest marks in that subject. Looking back on my past life, I feel inclined to think that I should not have neglected sports. By doing so, I probably developed precocity and accentuated my introvert tendencies. To ripen too early is not good, either for a tree or for a human being, and one has to pay for it in the long run. Of the teachers, there was one who left a permanent impression on my youthful mind. That was our headmaster, Babu Beni Madhav Das. I was not old enough then to realize what it was that I adored. I could only feel that here was a man who was not an ordinary teacher, who stood apart from and above the rest of his tribe. And I secretly said to myself that if I wanted an ideal for my life, it should be to emulate him. I came across the works of Swami Vivekananda. I had hardly turned over a few pages when I realized that here was something which I had been longing for. I was barely 15 when Vivekananda entered my life. Then there followed a revolution within, and everything was turned upside down. It was of course a long time before I could appreciate the full significance of his teachings or the greatness of his personality. But certain impressions were stamped indelibly on my mind from the outset. From Vivekananda, I turned gradually to his master, Ramakrishna Paramahansa. Vivekananda had made speeches, written letters, and published books which were available to the layman. But Ramakrishna, who was almost an illiterate man, had nothing of the kind. He had lived his life and had left it to others to explain it. The effectiveness of Ramakrishna's appeal lay, however, in the fact that he had practiced what he preached. His conception of Vedanta was based on scientific principles. One of his missions in life was to bring about a reconciliation between science and religion. I sat for the matriculation examination in March 1913 and came out second in the whole university. My parents were delighted and I was packed off to Calcutta. Life in Calcutta, like life in any other modern metropolis, is not good for everybody, and it has been the ruin of many promising souls. It might have proved disastrous in my case, had not I come there with certain definite ideas and principles fixed in my mind. I was barely 16 and a half years old when I walked into the precincts of Presidency College. Nevertheless, like so many others, I felt as if I was suddenly entering into man's estate. The main hostel of the college, known as the Eden Hindu Hostel, was looked upon as the hotbed of sedition, a rendezvous of revolutionaries, and was frequently searched by the police. For the first 2 years of my college life, I was greatly under the influence of the group, and I developed intellectually during this period. The group consisted mainly of students. We could be called the Neo Vivekananda group, and our main object was to bring about a synthesis between religion and nationalism, not merely in the theoretical sphere, but in practical life as well. The emphasis on nationalism was inevitable in the political atmosphere of Calcutta of those days. In my undergraduate days, Aurobindo Ghosh was easily the most popular leader in Bengal, despite his voluntary exile and absence since 1909. His was a name to conjure with. He had sacrificed a lucrative career in order to devote himself to politics. On the Congress platform, he had stood up as a champion of left-wing thought and a fearless advocate of independence at a time when most of the leaders, with their tongues in their cheeks, would talk only of colonial self-government. At college, I began to neglect my studies. Most of the lectures were uninteresting and the professors still more so. I would sit absent-minded and go on philosophizing about the why and wherefore of such futile studies. Most boring of all was the professor of mathematics, whose formula would bring me to the verge of desperation. To make life more interesting and purposeful, I engaged in various public activities of the student community, barring sports of course. I also went out of my way to get acquainted with such professors as Sir P.C. Ray, the eminent chemist and philanthropist, who did not belong to our department but was extremely popular with the students. For my degree, I took the honours course in philosophy, a long cherished desire. I threw myself heart and soul into this work. For the first time in my college career, I found interest in studies. I had possibly looked upon the study of philosophy as some sort of yogic exercise, and I was bound to be disappointed. I actually acquired not wisdom, but intellectual discipline and a critical frame of mind. At the BA examination in 1919, I did well, but not up to my expectations. I got first class honours in philosophy, but was placed second in order of merit. For my MA course, I did not want to continue philosophy. One evening when my father was in Calcutta, he asked me if I would like to go to England to study for the Indian Civil Service. If I agreed, I should start as soon as possible. I was given 24 hours to make up my mind. It was an utter surprise to me. I took counsel with myself and within a few hours made up my mind to go. How often I wondered were my carefully laid plans going to be shattered by the superior force of circumstances. I persuaded myself, however, that I could never pass the ICS examination at such short notice. For by the time I reached England and settled down to study, barely 8 months would be left, and I had but one chance, in view of my age. Relying entirely on my own resources and determined to try my luck in England, I set sail on the 15th September 1919. When I left India, the Jallianwala Bagh massacre at Amritsar had already taken place, but hardly any news of it had travelled outside Punjab. Punjab was under martial law, and there was a strict censorship on all news sent out from that province. As a consequence, we had heard only vague rumours of some terrible happenings at Lahore and Amritsar. It was the first week of November before I could settle down to work at Cambridge. I had an unusually large number of lectures to attend. Outside my lecture hours, I had to study as hard as I could. There was no question of any enjoyment for me besides what I could get from hard work. I was to appear under the old civil service regulations, which necessitated my taking up 8 or 9 different subjects, some of which I had to study for the first time. What greatly impressed an outsider like myself was the measure of freedom allowed to the students. What a change, I thought, from a police-ridden city like Calcutta where every student was looked upon as a potential revolutionary and suspect. And living in the atmosphere of Cambridge, it was difficult to imagine the incidents in the Calcutta Presidency College, professors maltreating students. There is another thing which drew my admiration, the debates at the Union Society's meetings. The whole atmosphere was so exhilarating. There was perfect freedom to talk what you liked or attack whomsoever you wished. Prominent members of parliament and sometimes members of the cabinet took part in these debates in a spirit of perfect equality. and would of course come in for slashing criticism not unmixed with incentive at times. In India, members of the civil service used to be known formerly as shop janta. I realized this when I sat for the civil service examination with 9 subjects on my shoulders. Not all of them have been useful to me in later life, but I must say that the study of political science, economics, English, history, and modern European history proved to be beneficial. This was especially the case with modern European history. Before I studied this subject, I did not have a clear idea of the politics of continental Europe. We Indians are taught to regard Europe as magnified edition of Great Britain. Consequently, we have a tendency to look at the continent through the eyes of England. This is of course a gross mistake, but not having been to the continent, I did not realize it till I studied modern European history and some of its original sources like Bismarck's autobiography, Metternich's memoirs, Cabert's letters, etc. These original sources, more than anything else I studied at Cambridge, helped to rouse my political sense and to foster my understanding of the inner currents of international politics. Early in July 1920, the Civil Service Open Competitive Examination began in London. It dragged on for a month and the agony was a prolonged one. I had worked hard on the whole, but my preparation was far below my expectation, so I could not feel hopeful. So many brilliant students had come down in spite of years of preparation that it would require some conceit to feel anything but diffident. My diffidence was heightened when I foolishly threw away about 150 sure marks in my Sanskrit paper. I informed my people that I had not done well and I could not hope to find a place among the selected candidates. I got a telegram one night when I was in London from a friend. Congratulations, see Morning Post. Next morning when I got a copy of the Morning Post, I found that I had come out 4th. I had now another problem to face. What should I do with the job? Was I going to give the go-by to all my dreams and aspirations and settle down to a comfortable life? It took me 7 long months to make up my mind. In the meantime, I started a correspondence with my second brother, Sharat. The letter was written on the 6th April from Oxford. By then I had received my father's letter disapproving of my plans, but I had definitely made up my mind to resign. The following extracts are interesting. If we all stick to our jobs and look after our own interest, I don't think we shall get home rule even in 50 years. Each family, if not each individual, should now bring forward its offering to the feet of the mother. My greatest objection to joining the service was based on the fact that I would have to sign the covenant and thereby own the allegiance of a foreign bureaucracy which I feel rightly or wrongly has no moral right to be there. I have come to believe that compromise is a bad thing. It degrades the man and injures his cause. On 18th May, I wrote from Cambridge as follows. Sir William Duke is trying to persuade me to withdraw my resignation. He wrote to Bardana about it. The Secretary of the Civil Service Board at Cambridge, Mr. Roberts, also asked me to reconsider my decision, and he said he was acting under the instruction from the Indian office. I have sent word to Sir William, saying that I have acted after mature deliberation. Mr. Roberts argued long with me and tried to persuade me that under the new constitution, I should try the service for a couple of years. It was possible under the new constitution to serve the country while remaining in the service. I thanked him but told him that I had made up my mind because I felt that I could not serve 2 masters.